These are the 8 common attack patterns in the English language. The first part of it is the bait. That is the part that elicits an immediate and often visceral emotional reaction from the person who is being attacked. And then the second part is the presupposition. It's one or more, often more, thinly veiled assumptions about the person that is being attacked, who they are, what they're doing, and what they know. Just by show of hands, how many of you contribute back to an open source project, any open source project? Okay, so this example might seem familiar. It comes without judgment, just letting you know. It is also not something that we specifically pulled out of any open source project, but will feel familiar regardless. So this says, if you really cared about this project, you wouldn't waste time asking questions that everyone knows the answer to. You may not have heard exactly those words, but you've definitely heard that sort of sentiment, and you can see already that it's extremely hard to figure out these stresses in text. No one actually writes an attacking comment and gives you text stress like this. And most likely, they're also not sitting right in front of you saying, "You there, don't care about us." However, let's take this apart, and we can kind of get an idea of what we're talking about when we say bait and when we say presuppositions. This part that you see highlighted in red, waste time asking questions, that is the bait part of this attack. It is designed to make your fight or flight part in your brain say, oh, they think that I'm wasting time, and panic and start a fight with you. There are 2 presuppositions in here. This is the first one, really cared about this project. It's assuming that, for one, the person who's asking the question doesn't care about the project, and unfortunately enough, it assumes that if you do care about a project, you never ask questions. This is not true, but that is a presupposition that's built in there, and there is a specific purpose to it, which I'll talk about after we look at the second presupposition. The next one is everyone knows the answer to. This is assuming that 1, the attacker knows everybody, which they probably don't, and 2, that everyone that they already know actually has that answer ready to go. The purpose of the presupposition in a verbal attack is to make sure that those people who are being attacked understand that the attacker is the one in power, they know more people, they care more about the project, all of that stuff. And so it takes this situation where you are ostensibly equals because everybody has a space to contribute to an open source project, and says, your stuff is not as good as mine because I know more people and I care more. So the emotional response and then those presuppositions that set it up so that externally, because they didn't say, I do care and questions mean I care, it set up this idea that obviously you're not as good a contributor to the project. You should use any time that you're responding to a verbal attack from someone. First is to know that you're under attack. This is hard, as I mentioned, because so often we don't have the text stress. No one's bolding and highlighting things in red on the internet to let you know which one is the bad part and which one is the good part. But more importantly, you have to know the type of attack you're facing. This is equally hard. Sometimes it's fact-based, buried in those presuppositions. Sometimes it's emotionally based, there in that bait part. And so often it is a result of extreme fatigue over something that had nothing to do with you. And so understanding where the attack is coming from, incredibly difficult, but also incredibly important. Know how to respond to the attack. We're not talking about this right now because it's coming up in the next slide. Knowing how to respond to the attack is difficult on the internet, but we have 5 quick tips that will help you to figure out how to do it for yourself. And 4, know how to follow through. It's one thing to know that you have just had a verbal attack, or that you seem to be getting attacked by somebody on the internet, or someone in the room with you, and an entirely different thing to know what to do about it. These 5 things that I'm about to tell you are things that, while I was trying to internalize those 4 principles, like I said, very broad, very big picture, when I was in college and trying to learn how not to be quite so mean on the internet, because the internet was new. Also, don't tweet out that I was ever a mean person. I'm just not that scary. However, these 5 things really helped me to process the information correctly and respond as best. So the first thing is to ignore the bait. If you can identify which part of a comment is the bait and which part is the presupposition, ignore the bait part. That's the part that is designed to get you off guard and to get you off your center and start an emotional response fight. It's impossible to be attacked and not want to instantly attack back. That's that dumb part of your brain back there that's like, ooh, it's gonna kill me, I should fight it. So ignore the bait part as best you can. Now that you've done that, be sure to identify the presuppositions and find out what that's actually about. By find out what that's actually about, what I mean is ask yourself if there is truth in it. All presuppositions are based around facts about something, and that doesn't mean it's a fact about you. So for instance, in the presuppositions that we had in our example, if I said, if you really care about this project, that's your presupposition. The fact in that is that some people don't care about giving back to a project. Some people are asking questions that aren't necessarily relevant, but that's the part that you're trying to deal with. You can deal with it by saying, I do care about this project, and I think that asking questions is the way to improve my understanding of it. If you're dealing with the second presupposition, which is that you're wasting oh no, that was the bait, which is that everybody already knows the answer. A thing that I always recommend to our community members in WordPress is to say, if everybody has the answer, which is possible, perhaps we should make it easier to find. That is a fact-based response to a fact-based presupposition, and all of a sudden, you have not gotten yourself into a situation where the person who has said, you don't care about us, is just saying that and it's going unnoticed. You've said, I do care, these are the things that I care about, let's make it better. And you're no longer losing face in the wake of that. This one was really hard for me as a teenager. So assume that no harm is meant. I had across my monitor taped just a little quote that said, any response that you make angry is the best response that you will ever regret. Because there's that moment where you're like, well, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to send you this really mean email, and you're going to know how smart I am because I'm mean. We can all take a moment and appreciate how crazy that sounds, right? And I felt that way. I was like, you're going to understand how smart I am because I'm faster at this fight than you are. So assuming that no harm is meant is an extremely important first step, but more important than that is to inhibit your gut reaction. So there's a law called Miller's Law that says the only way that we can have healthy communication is to assume that whatever anyone is saying has some truth in it, and then you should find out what that is true about. That's not literal, it's not word for word, because that was in my notes. But if you look for Miller's Law, you'll find it. The important and difficult part about that is that if I say to you, hey, my toaster started talking to me and it scares me, your initial reaction is to say, well, that's crazy, toasters don't talk. But really, if you want to have open and honest communication with people on the internet, people in your life, what you should really be compelled to say is, man, that would really be stressful. What is the toaster saying to you? Right? That is an extreme example. I understand that if someone actually has a talking toaster, there are other things you should do. So again, don't tell anyone that I say, toasters talk. Don't tweet that. Or tweet it and say that I didn't say it. So to inhibit your gut reaction is a really important part of things. That's not to say that your first reaction is not the right reaction. But just like that quote that I had at the top of my monitor said, if you make your gut reaction an angry response to something, that is always the wrong choice. But trust your gut. If you feel like you're being attacked and you think to yourself, the only thing that I can do here is to respond to these presuppositions, respond, for heaven's sake. Don't let people attack you blindly. But also don't respond as angrily and negatively as you want to. The point of the response is to de-escalate the situation by addressing the incident, by addressing the presuppositions that are in it and the facts that are underlying in there. There are additional resources. This is a really hard thing to do. It took me, I want to say like 7 years to stop wanting to instantly say to you, you know what, you said this mean thing to me, and right now I'm going to say a mean thing right back to you. It took me 7 years, everybody. I'm so glad you met me after that happened. I'm a much more pleasant person now than I probably was when I was 17.